This is Tyrese Haliburton, and you're listening to Setting the Pace.
Happy Monday, Pacer Nation. Welcome back to another episode here of your go-to Pacers podcast, Setting the Pace. I'm your host, Alex Golden, and I'm joined by the lovely, the one and only, the New York Mets fan, ladies and gentlemen, Michael J. Facci. Facci, how we doing, brother?
Do love some Mets. I am lovely. But if you are watching this on YouTube, Alex and I are not wearing the same shirt, all right? It is the same color blue with some yellow lettering, but it is not the same shirt. We did not coordinate this.
No, we did not. I was laughing when Facci got on. He's got his Setting the Pace shirt on that you guys can get on our Teespring, I believe is the name, or TeePublic. I can't remember. It's been so long since we promoted the shirts, but the shirts are still out there. So I'll put a link in the description. I think it's teepublic.com. So make sure you guys check that out and get on that. But I do want to ask you, Facci.
We got
Edwin Diaz, New York Mets, closer, relief pitcher. That song that he walks out to at home is one of the most epic things I've seen in baseball in a long time. And I feel like the Major League Baseball game has died quite a bit in terms of fan interest. I mean, I'm a St. Louis Cardinals fan, and I was like, the beginning of the year, I was really going to keep up with it. If you saw my Twitter, I was going to do a thread of every game. It was so rough. And then all of a sudden they start playing better. It's like, it's 162 games. I don't know what I was thinking, but regardless, Edwin Diaz has this epic walkout song. And I'm curious, what is the name of that song? And did you see the reaction from Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce on Twitter?
I don't know the name of the song, but I believe the guy's name is Tommy Trumpets who plays it. It really gets everybody on their feet. It's definitely something that is really entertaining. It feels like an absolute showdown is about to go down anytime Edwin Diaz is coming out. A couple of years ago, he was an absolute stud. I think it was his Achilles that he tore, celebrating just before last year, like the World Baseball Classic, and he hasn't quite been the same, but still a good closer.
Yeah, it's called Narco, and it's by Timmy Trumpet, not Tommy
Trumpets. All right, there we go. It's Tommy.
Timmy, tomato, right?
Exactly.
It's pretty epic though, and it reminds me of Major League and Major League 2 with Charlie Sheen when he walks out to Wild Thing.
Yeah,
he comes out onto the field. So some really cool stuff there. I just love it, Foch. I think it's great. It feels very WWE like, and I wish there was more stuff like that in sports.
100%. I mean, people want these athletes to be colorful, like have some entertainment behind it. Like, baseball at times could be a little bit boring. They've done a good job speeding it up a little bit with the pitch count, with just the timer and everything like that. And as it relates to your Cardinals and Mets, neck and neck as it relates to the wild card. So that'll be a showdown that maybe you and I will be keeping track of if it remains close. But
yeah,
Mets typically a good team for a couple months, and they kind of fade off a little bit.
I would say if history repeats itself, I feel like the Cardinals will probably get the upper hand there.
They might.
I still remember that it was the NLCS, right? When the Cardinals beat the Mets. And they had Carlos Beltran in 7 games.
Yeah, that was the infamous called strike where he was caught looking, and no one forgets that. I mean, just didn't swing, and that was pretty much the end of for a while of the Mets. They weren't relevant for a while, but hey, you've opened up some wounds today. There's some more positive stuff we could talk about centered around the Indiana Pacers.
Yeah, well, we're gonna get a little bit negative, I guess we could say, because Team USA has made a massive mistake by benching Tyrese Haliburton for Derek White, who was not even a part of Team USA's 12-man roster that was recruited. Kawhi Leonard was dismissed by Team USA's doctors. Apparently, Lawrence Frank and the Clippers staff were disappointed with Team USA's decision to not let Kawhi play in the Olympics. So it feels like they bring Derek White in, someone that plays the same position as a Tyrese Haliburton. He is a much better defender than Tyrese Haliburton, but overall, as a player, Tyrese Haliburton is better, and Tyrese Haliburton has had some very good moments with Team USA within the last week, and all of a sudden, he's relegated now to kind of like the 12th man on the roster. So it's an interesting thing to kind of see someone as talented as Haliburton fall that far in the rotation, but let's talk about this, Facci, because I think that Team USA is making a massive mistake by not allowing Tyrese to be Tyrese, especially in FIBA play.
I think they're making a mistake as well, because it's easy to just look at it and say, what has he even done? Well, look back to the game against Australia. He hit 2 big threes down the stretch when Team USA was barely holding on. They were clinging to a very small lead those Haliburton threes proved to be very big. And then if you want to just go to the game against Canada, he was a plus 17. That led all of Team USA. I mean, he's not going to be in the Olympics. You're not putting up stats. If you think that like Tyrese is going to go out there and have like a 20-point, 10 assist game, like you're wrong. Anthony Edwards leads this group with 13.5 points per game. So Tyrese isn't going to be putting up numbers, but what he can do is ball control. I mean, he has just one turnover in their 4 appearances for Team USA. It's like you're going to get someone who's going to protect the rock. That's what he was brought in to do. But you want to see him playing more than a couple of minutes.
No, for sure. And I mean, I've seen a lot of times too when Tyrese is in the game, they have him off ball.
Definitely.
We saw how that looked in Sacramento, and there's a reason why the Kings were willing to trade him. He can play off ball. The Pacers have seen that plenty of times with how the other teams have covered him defensively, and you've seen Nembhard kind of run the offense. But he is a magician with the basketball. He was voted by his Team USA teammates as the best point guard in the NBA. Yet he can't even make the 10-man rotation for Team USA. That kind of seems a little bit disrespectful. And I understand that I am being personal here with this because I do want the Pacer players to get that experience. And regardless of whether he's playing or not, like this is a great experience for him to be with these guys and be with Team USA. A lot of great players on this roster. And I think that does play a factor. Like you have to look at it and say, well, he might be, 10th or 11th or 12th, whatever, in terms of like ranking the players and who you'd want on your team. But at the same time, part of it is fit. And I do believe that there are so many ball dominant players on this team, and Kevin Durant hasn't even been in the rotation yet because he's been battling an injury. So you take Durant out of the picture, now you're down to 11 players, and Tyrese is not playing at all. But you've got guys like Devin Booker, you got guys like Anthony Edwards, LeBron. They want the ball in their hands, and when they're out there on the court, they can kind of take some of those reps, those reps from Tyrese Haliburton. So Tyrese is one of those laid back personalities that he said, I don't want to have 10 points. I could have 2 points and 10 assists and I'd be happy. But the way Team USA has kind of run their offense, it seems like Tyrese Haliburton has found himself more sitting in the corner than really doing anything with the basketball in a pick and roll situation. And when he has been able to run those pick and rolls, I feel like it's been pretty good. It's just been a limited sample size, but you go back to the first 2 games, he was the best player in terms of plus minus. And it makes no sense why all of a sudden, okay, like maybe it is a matchup thing, but to me, it feels more like, this might be a changing of the rotation more than it is this was a 1-game sample size.
Yeah, it very well could be. And they have been at times playing like hockey shifts of players, but it definitely does feel short term. There's a chance that Derek White may have jumped him in the rotation. Yeah, defense, at times like Team USA have been slipping in their last game, and I feel like maybe they needed that defensive boost from Derek White. But Tyrese has more that he could give. On the flip side, yeah, it is just special that he is out there. Like, for instance, everyone goes in Jalen Brunson didn't make the team because of Tyrese brings something different. If Brunson was on this team, I don't know what role he would really be playing when they already have a lot of scorers. So it's like LeBron's already playing some point guard, for them. Same with Steph Curry. Then you look at this, and they have another guard who could play point guard, and Drew Holiday. And I just feel like there's this like weird transition phase right now where you look at LeBron, you look at Steph Curry, you look at Drew Holiday, and you're like, okay, this is most likely their last Olympics. Same thing with like a Kevin Durant. With those guys gone, it really does feel like this is good experience for Haliburton, but I feel like next time around, I mean, he could really be one of the main guys on this team. And I think they are still trying to figure some stuff out. They went through a similar process with Joel Embiid where it was like, it's not looking great for Embiid out there. And I think, there was a game where, he played 12 minutes against Canada, he fouled out, but other times it was about 16 minutes. It's like, you're used to seeing him play a little bit more, but yeah, that's the thing with the Olympics. It's just so much talent on one team that it's hard to get vintage play out of any player.
I think Joel Embiid's case is a lot different because this guy's a foul merchant and he constantly flops to try to get calls. And in FIBA, they don't really give you that and they don't really honor that. So I kind of like it better because it kind of shows you like how Joel Embiid has made a living as a player when he doesn't need to do that. Joel Embiid's a great basketball player without trying to do all that, but he just has created such a monster inside of himself to do that all the time that it's kind of hard to break those habits, where I think Tyrese is just in a totally different spot. He's willing to come off the bench. He's, one of those guys that is willing to take a lesser role and understands that. But you're right. There is a lot of players that are probably in their last years on Team USA, because you look at a guy like Drew Holiday and you kind of think to yourself, I understand, like, Drew's a really good player, and we saw him have some great moments against the Pacers in the Eastern Conference Finals, some great moments against the Mavericks in the finals. Like, he's still a very, very, very impactful player. But at the same time, you know, is he one of the 12 best players in the league? No. So it's hard to say that and not sound disrespectful, but it is what it is. I think Drew's a very good complimentary piece, same as Derek White. They all kind of make sense. But when you let Kawhi Leonard go, when you bring in a guard like Derek White, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. So maybe they felt like they had the position covered that needed some more guard depth. But overall, I think they've got plenty of talent. And like you said, I'm not going to knock Steve Kerr for not playing Haliburton, because I think Derek White did a good job in those minutes he did play. But I will say this, there's going to be a game later in this Olympic run where they're going to need Tyrese Haliburton and his playmaking to help lift them. And I think that's going to be something that they go to at some point in the near future. And if they don't go to it, they might find themselves in trouble. And I just think that he can change a game with his pace and his ability to get others involved. Like when you watch them play Team Canada, when him and Anthony Edwards came into the game, man, that was like a totally different team. And that was with limited chemistry, but they played together last year in FIBA. So a little bit more connectivity than maybe some of the starters had because they hadn't played together in a while. So that's just where I'm at with it, but I don't think we need to spend too much more time on it. I think it's time to move on.
Absolutely. Look, he'll have his moment. It's just, we're all anxious for it.
Let's move on to Andrew Nembhard, who is with Team Canada. We've been talking about Team Canada, and we always talk about Team USA and Haliburton because we are from Indiana, this is the United States of America, but Canada is our country to the north of us, and they've got one of the Pacers players on their team, Andrew Nembhard, who is playing much better, Facci. So tell me a little bit more about how Andrew Nembhard's doing with Team Canada.
Yeah, so look, I wish it would have been two players in terms of Benedict Mathurin and Andrew Nembhard, but we obviously know the injury to Mathurin. But here's the thing. After Nembhard had a tough showing in his first game against Team USA, where he actually missed all of his shots, he still received very high compliments from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander saying, look, Andrew's someone who's never making mistakes. He's always making that smart play. And, classic Nembhard, he bounces back, has a solid game against France, scores 10 points on 5 of 8 shooting, has 5 assists, and is yet to commit a turnover in any of the Olympic games so far. So that's been awesome to see for both of our, whether you want to call them point guards or guards. This is incredible experience. Nembhard's getting a little bit more playing time, but I think that's because that Team Canada is really good. Team USA is definitely stacked. These are really good rosters, and both of these players are going to come out better from the type of competition they're going up against on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think Alex Riley had a great highlight clip of Andrew Nembhard's play in the Olympics so far, and obviously this is not the Olympic Games. These games don't really count right now. They're just kind of exhibition games. I don't know what you call it exactly, but I do love what we're seeing from Nembhard in the little minutes he's getting off the bench. He had this beautiful floater, Facci. I don't know if you saw it or not, but it was like a high falling teardrop that he just netted, and I was like, man, he's really added that to his game. It feels like that is not something I saw too much last year, but you kind of remember like little bits and pieces of him doing that. But like he's just got such a great touch, and whether that's shooting or passing, he kind of knows how to thread the needle a little bit. Me and you are both big Andrew Nembhard fans. I will say this in the YouTube comment section when we were ranking our players. Some people said that you having Nembhard above Pascal Siakam in trade value was nasty work. So, we are big believers in Nembhard. But I will say this, great young player that's going to continue to evolve. Don't know if his ceiling is an all-star or not, but I love the way that he's just kind of embraced this role, and everybody just kind of seems to forget about how talented he actually is. But Team Canada realized right away, like, this is a guy we want to get on our roster. And I think last year he had the chance to play with him, and he declined, and so did Benedict Mathurin, to stay in Indianapolis to craft and get better at their game. So that to me speaks a lot about their maturity and where they are at as players, mentally trying to think of the long-term thing. Playing for your country is awesome. It's more important to secure that long-term payday in the NBA, and so they focus on getting better themselves. But big fan of what Nembhard's doing for Team Canada, even if it is in a limited role.
It feels like a TV show between Haliburton and Nembhard. Like they're both young. They're like rising up the ranks. One's playing for Team USA, one's playing for Team Canada. Like they both could be point guards. Like it's just like they're gonna bring out the best in each other. And I really do hope that that's a long-term thing. But for right now, you can't make an argument saying that these guys aren't going to come back as better players. Like we talked about, the competition on both these teams is so good. But going back to Haliburton right now, and I'm sure it's the same case for Nembhard. These guys are building relationships. I mean, I have seen just a ton of like Haliburton and Anthony Edwards like together and doing that bonding. You never know where that could lead one day. I don't know if Andrew Nembhard's the type of recruiter that Tyrese Haliburton is, but there's a lot of good talent that could have that opening, that red carpet to be an Indiana Pacer one day, and I'm really, really excited for that. I just wish Benedict Mathurin could also be a part of that, because Nembhard, I really do think this year he's going to have like the casual NBA fan really paying attention to be like, yeah, I like that guy. He's got a lot better, and I feel like last year was like the playoffs was his introduction to the NBA world.
You think we can call this comparison of like Nembhard versus Haliburton similar to Shawn Michaels versus Bret the Hitman Hart?
It
Canada reference.
Be. Yeah, I mean, look, I like it. It definitely could be. I love when you could build. I don't want to call it a rivalry. I don't because I don't want to make it into something that it's not. I just want to see these guys continue to grow, and hopefully it's with the Indiana Pacers. But regardless, I love me a wrestling reference.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the first thing I went through was like television, and I was thinking like Seinfeld versus Friends. Because a lot of people that love Seinfeld hate Friends and vice versa, and they were on during the same time for a little bit there.
I'm kind of in that boat. I'm a real big Seinfeld guy.
I'm not hate Friends.
It's like I don't want to say hate, but at one point I definitely did hate Friends.
Felt like you had to, right?
What was that?
You felt like you had to because it wasn't.
I did. I felt like it was like just like a knockoff Seinfeld. And look, I know there's probably someone listening right now that's like, what are you talking about? It is a good show. I just prefer Seinfeld, and since I started with that show first, I'm biased.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, I will say I'm an appreciator of both shows. I think both shows are good. I think Seinfeld is better, but I will say I do love some Friends. I find some of the comedic parts there really funny. A lot of good characters, but regardless, they're both really good, is what I was trying to get at. Mm-hmm. Both great in their own way, but it's a comparison, and it feels like there's a little bit of a battle of who's going to get that spot as a top show in people's hearts. But same thing with Nembhard. It's a really exciting time for him, because tomorrow, Facci, if you're listening to this on Monday, today, Andrew Nembhard officially becomes eligible to sign a 4-year, $78 million extension with the Indiana Pacers. And per Evan Sattery, who is a very well-known aggregator on Twitter/X, he said that Indiana plans to offer their young backcourt combo guard his rookie scale max as a former second-round pick. I just want to put this out there. Evan Sattery is not a reporter. He is an aggregator. So I am not sure if he is reporting this on his own, if he saw somebody else's tweet and aggregated it. Not sure. There's been times where he has tagged people when he does aggregate their work. There's been times when he has not tagged people when he aggregates their work. So I don't want to get people's hopes up and saying, oh my God, the Pacers are reported to offer him this, when it's not officially out there. If somebody else has put it out there and I have missed it, I apologize. But it is one of those things where I can't officially say like, oh, this is in the works because Evan Sattery posted it. Evan Sattery has a very popular Twitter account, but at the same time, he is basically your NBA Central, Hoop Central, that kind of stuff, where it is not necessarily their report, but it is other people's work that they aggregate and keep it all in one spot. So your thoughts, Facci, on what you expect the Pacers and Nembhard to do with this extension?
I would really like the Pacers to be offering that extension the moment they can, because that shows you're our priority. Like we want to get this done, and I think that would make Nembhard feel a certain way. Like, hey, I am very much valued. I think that when you look at 4 years, $78 million, it kind of sounds cheap now, but like 2-3 years from now, that's going to sound like a steal of a contract. And I know I already brought this guy's name up once, but I feel it's a similar type of situation. I feel if the Pacers let Nembhard walk, it could end up being Jalen Brunson-esque. I'm not saying the guy's going to average 30 points per game. I'm saying it's going to be that other guard that you had that maybe you were like, well, is he as good? And then you see him go to another, setting, we'll say, another team, and blossom. I don't want to be the guy watching on the sidelines. And the last thing I want is to ever almost have to root against him in any way. I want to always be able to root for Nembhard, but I really wanted to be in a Pacers uniform. I really do feel that $78 million, which basically is between $18 to $19 million on average, that's a steal. It really is, especially with the salary cap going up. So what are your thoughts in terms of if they offer?
Yeah, it's $19.5 million per year, Facci, on annual average value. So, I mean, I think it's a great contract for Nembhard and the type of player that he is right now as a starter in the league, proving himself more and more. The only question I have, and I even was messaging you about this, do they even offer him the extension? I mean, I guess they could, but can they really get an extension done if he's playing for Team Canada right now? Does he really want that distraction? Because although he can become eligible, it's not like it goes away. It's not like he has like, oh, you got to sign this extension in a day. He's got, I don't know how much time, but I think it's pretty much quite a bit of time now for them to come to an extension agreement before, the end of the season's over, and then they'll have a decision whether to pick up his contract or not for the 2025 offseason, which we talked about ad nauseum on this podcast. But I think that if they can pick it up, $19.5 million is a very fair deal for the type of player Andrew Nembhard is, for where money is at right now. And at the beginning of the offseason and before the offseason started, I was very skeptical about Nembhard signing this. But you talked about it, and I talked about it last week. With the amount of money that has dried up so quickly with the new CBA, it does seem like teams are more than likely going to see their own players re-sign because they're not going to have that money elsewhere out there. So there might be a team that has money to do it, and he might be a player that people want to pounce on if that possibility is there for them to do. But I just wonder how many people will have their backs up against the wall with the inability to offer him that big contract, and is he willing to take that risk? I think if I'm Andrew Nembhard, I play it safe, and I take the extension given to me if this is what I'm offered, and we go from there. But it's tough to say. I mean, that's a lot of money. It's a big pay raise for Andrew Nembhard from what he's making now. It's just I don't blame him for betting on himself, but with the way the well has dried up so quick in the offseason, I would be a little bit nervous.
Yeah, I really do think that. I know when you're saying, hey, look, he's away doing this, but this is supposed to be like the monumental day. Your second contract in sports is really when you get paid. And I think this is an incredible opportunity for him. I think that anything could happen later on if he's starting to say, hey, you know what, they're never going to if you sign this, you know that you're not going to be the starting point guard of the Indiana Pacers. Is that really important to him, or is he able to just trust Carlisle's offense and how explosive it was to say, you're going to have your opportunities. Like, you will. And I think that, with that, who knows what kind of questions are asked behind the scenes of, hey, does this mean I'll still be the starting two guard? I don't know if the Pacers would promise anything, but when you get paid a contract like that, you would think you'd have a good chance at holding down that starting spot. But I think for Andrew Nembhard, I think you sign it. Obviously, I'm speaking with my heart. It's a good amount of money for a second-round pick that's making $2 million each for the next year. To be able to make 10 times that is an incredible opportunity. And I think that, we had him on our show. Look, he likes this group that he's with. Mm-hmm. It's a young group that is on that same type of timeline with him. And winning does help. It's not like it's going to go, hey, I went from winning at Gonzaga to all of a sudden I go to the Indiana Pacers. It's not going well. They just made a conference finals run. Like, I feel like that's going to speak volumes along with the dollar sign next to that X on the dotted line.
Yeah, there is a role for Andrew Nembhard to be a starter on this team long term. I think that the Pacers like his ability to play next to Tyrese. I think he's big enough, being 6'5", to play the two guard if they need him to play the two guard. We were talking about Derek White earlier. Like, if he can carve out a path to be like a better on-ball scorer than Derek White, but at that same level as a shooter and potentially get there defensively, like, that feels pretty good. And I mean, really good, honestly, because Derek White, I think at one point people were considering him for the All-Star team. So, yeah. I mean, if he can get close to that, that would feel great. It's just, he'll be 25 in January of next season. So if he does get a 4-year extension, that would make him a free agent at 29 and a half years old. So he would still have plenty of time to go out there and sign another big contract if he decides, you know what, I spent my first 3 years here in Indiana, or my first 7 years, in Indiana, whatever that contract extension would equal out to years-wise. I'm ready to go and test the water somewhere else, or maybe he gets traded after he signs a contract. I mean, we never want to talk about that, but it is a possibility. I just think there's a lot of options out there. If they do kind of pick it up, it's definitely more beneficial for Indiana to get it than
I think
him.
so.
But I think that there is a case you can make where it is maybe more beneficial for him to take it now, considering the amount of money that's drying up.
That's the thing is, look, I don't want to be a negative Nancy out here, but what if Andrew did regress? I mean, there's a scenario where if he regresses, that Pacers, that offer of about $19.5 million might not be there, and that could be a totally different scenario later on. We've heard plenty of those type of situations. Like, I'm not going to compare him to Dennis Schroeder, but it's like, he left a lot of money on the table, a lot of money by not signing that contract earlier and finishing out that season. For Andrew, look, he's younger. I think he's continuously getting better. The whole Team Canada thing, I think that's really going to improve his defense. There's no nights off in that situation, and I think that he is the perfect fit next to Tyrese Haliburton. So I think the Pacers can get this done. Yeah, it probably does benefit Indiana, assuming that we trust their player development. It's been great. He's going to continuously take those steps forward, so you're going to have him locked up for the next 6 years at that point. I think that there's a lot to like. I really hope they can get this deal done, because if they can't, you start to now have those questions with Turner hitting free agency after the year, with Nembhard not signing that contract. Does that mean the Pacers have to get ahead and trade him? You don't want this to be the distraction in the room. If he could sign this deal, that's one less question to ask all throughout the season and for the next few years.
Time will tell what happens with Andrew Nembhard, but we're going to be monitoring that closely here on Setting the Pace, and we will be covering that for you guys as it happens in real time. But with that being said, Facci, another thing we want to talk about today is the in-season tournament was released. Got some interesting news on who the Pacers pool will be this year of teams they will face. Last year, remember, they played the Pistons, the Cavaliers, the Hawks, and the 76ers, but this year, only one of those teams will be in the same group with the Pacers. They have 3 new opponents that they'll get to play in the in-season tournament, aka the NBA Cup. Would you like to reveal to those people, if they missed it, who the Pacers will be competing against this year?
Absolutely. So starting with the first team, I think you guys are all going to like this because the rivalry ain't going nowhere. It's the Milwaukee Bucks. So I love to have the Bucks in that group. Then you got the Heat, the Raptors, and the Pistons. I feel like it's a pretty balanced group. You're keeping the rivalry going with Milwaukee, and you might be reigniting that rivalry with the Miami Heat that's been gone for a couple seasons.
Last year, Indiana pretty much dominated Milwaukee. They had Miami's number last year as well, and they dominated the Pistons, as did everybody else in the league. Now, the one team they did struggle with was the Toronto Raptors, surprisingly, and the Raptors were not even a good team last year. So Indiana, I think it's going to be a fun matchup. You mentioned that the rivalry with the Milwaukee Bucks intensifies. It continues. Sayonara, Pat Beverly, who will not be a part of that as he is making his way over to Europe. Talked with Derek Schultz about that last week when you weren't able to make the show, but that is one less part of the rivalry that is there, but still, it'll be a good one, and it's going to be heated. I'm really curious to see where that game is played at. If it's in Milwaukee, I think I like the Bucks' chances a little bit better in that one, but if it's in Indiana, give me the Pacers in that one. Yeah. Miami, that's going to be a tough one. They're always a good team. It's just you never know what you're going to get with Jimmy Butler in Miami with their health and all that kind of stuff. They've been such an up and down team the last couple of years, but Toronto, they're kind of in a rebuild mode. Don't really know where they're going. And Detroit, like, they want to get better, but at the same time, they just, I don't know what direction are they heading? I mean, Tobias Harris, big pickup, right? So to me, like, Indiana has a chance to win this group. I think they could. I don't know if they will, but I think they could repeat and make it back to the top 4 of the NBA Cup for the Eastern Conference.
I can't say that they can't, because last year, I remember we looked at this and we didn't know what to expect out of the Pacers. It was like, okay, maybe you steal one against Cleveland. Yeah, I don't know, maybe Milwaukee. They blew us out of the water in terms of what we expected and what ended up happening. So I look at this now and I'm like, the Pacers can win this. They really can. You look at the Bucks off season, Gary Trent Jr. they brought in. That's about it. So I look at this as Miami. They didn't really do much at all either. Who did they just bring in? They brought in someone. It's not even
Alec Burks.
Alec Burks. That was their offseason. So Alec Burks is your big pickup at this point. Like, give me the Pacers. So you look at Toronto, they're taking a step back. Detroit's going to be better. Detroit was so awful last year that they could only improve. And then, yes, I know Tobias Harris is he's a good punchline in the NBA, but like he's going to help their team. So, and I think their young talent will take a step forward, but not enough to really challenge the Pacers. So I think Indiana now has that playoff experience that these games, they had no problem getting up for the games that mattered.
No, they didn't, Facci. So I think that's going to be interesting. We'll come back to that here in a little bit with the in-season tournament. But I want to close things out with this first segment. I know this is a bit of a lengthier podcast for you guys, but hope you guys enjoy the lengthiness because we have not been doing as many days. Jeff Teague, former Pacers point guard, was on the Draymond Green Show. And I'm sure you guys saw the clip that went viral on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube about James Johnson and Jeff Teague spending time together at Wake Forest. And Jeff Teague tells a great story about James Johnson getting into it with football players, and like the football players coach is like, no. You don't want to mess with him. There was like this big moment where James Johnson was talking about like kickboxing and potentially not playing in the NBA, Facci, and going into kickboxing instead. And then even talked about getting into kickboxing once his NBA career is over. Obviously, James Johnson still not signed to a contract with the Pacers, but he was with the team in Summer League, and they spoke highly of his level of leadership on this team and how he kind of gives them, the Indiana Pacers, that is, their confidence. So some really good James Johnson stuff, more details about him. There's been a lot of good stories about James Johnson, it feels like, over the last couple of years with different podcasts that have just been his teammates since he's been in the league so long. But really interesting other part from this is that when Dennis Schroeder, who you brought up earlier, got brought into Atlanta, there was this decision that Mike Budenholzer in the front office had to make was, do we keep Jeff Teague and sign him to an extension, or do we give the reins over to Dennis Schroeder? And this is where the upper management told Budenholzer, we want to keep Schroeder. It's time for Teague to go. We don't want to pay him all this money. And so they were like, we got a trade lined up for you to go here, but where do you want to go? And he said, I want to go, because it's Philadelphia, I think, is where they were going to trade him. But Budenholzer said, where do you want to go? He said, I would like to go play for the Pacers, my hometown. And so Mike said, the least I can do for you is send you back to Indiana. So thought that was a really cool story. And Mike Budenholzer, obviously, he reunited with Jeff Teague when they won the championship in 2021. So some cool moments there. But let's talk about Jeff Teague with his time here in Indiana, because he revealed that he almost stayed in Indiana, Facci, but instead Jimmy Butler recruited him to the Minnesota Timberwolves the year he was a free agent. So talk to me a little about Jeff Teague's career.
Look, for Jeff Teague, I remember I was really excited when he was coming to the Pacers. And then I also love the guys that want to be a Pacer. And when you said that before, there's just always that feeling of like, when someone's like, I want to go to Indiana, it's like, yes, like, let's go. And Teague at the time, you got to rewind the clocks a little bit. Jeff Teague had a lot of promise. He was a one-time All-Star at the time. Had put up some good numbers with Atlanta. This was someone that came to the Pacers, started all 82 games the year that they got eliminated by the Cavs. And, it was a sweep, but here's the thing. It was the closest sweep in NBA history. Just 16 points total. Got to slip that in there. Look, he averaged 15 points, 8 assists. The defense was never really great at all. But I feel like that team never really gelled together. But the Jeff Teague experience was like, if you blinked, it was gone. It was just 1 year. And I think the Pacers in the end made the right move, because I do think that Jeff Teague at that point wasn't getting better. So maybe they did dodge a bullet. You start to ask this. Here's my next question. Who would you have rather had on that fun 2017-2018 team? Jeff Teague or Darren Collison?
You know what's funny is we didn't even talk about this. And I thought about that same question today as I was prepping my notes. And I thought to myself, I just think Darren Collison was a better fit for that team.
He was definitely a better fit. You're going to get less points, but that man his assist to turnover ratio was really good. He was really efficient. That year, he led the NBA in 3-point percentage, 46%. He was really good from the free throw line. He was just a good fit with the Pacers, while Jeff Teague probably had a little bit more firepower in him.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff Teague was a good player, and I think he's a little bit underrated, but I love that he's so down to earth, and he understands, I'm just lucky to be playing in the NBA. He's got a great podcast. I think it's called Club 520. I don't listen to it all the time. I've heard a lot of clips. He tells a lot of great stories. He talked about how his wife kind of was like, you need to tell more stories. Tell the story about Jimmy Butler and practice and stuff. That's what people want to hear. And I agree. Nobody wants to hear, we care about his thoughts on what's going on in the league and stuff like that. If he's previewing a series, that's fun. But the stories are what makes him separate. And I'm sure he's going to run out of stories eventually, but there's so many good stories that he could tell from his time in the league. And he was a journeyman, and had a lot of crazy things that happened, but I do like his honesty. I think he's a very honest person with his storytelling, and he doesn't really care if he shares information. But like he had a nickname, and he mentioned like everybody call me this, and Draymond's like, well, why do they call you that? He's like, I can't say that on air. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is great stuff.
Definitely a great storyteller. And I feel like, that's the thing is like you mentioned, everybody's always trying to cover the game. And it's like, just because you're a good player doesn't mean you give good opinions on certain teams and things
Gilbert
like that.
Arenas.
Exactly. Gilbert's gave some awful, horrific takes.
I have him muted. I can't stand seeing his stuff pop up on my.
This is what it was. Last year, I just couldn't believe when he was like, for Asar Thompson, he's like, if you're not averaging more than double digits in the NBA, you don't belong in the NBA. It's like, what? He's a rookie defender, who's a defensive specialty. Like, give the man some time. Like, it's just horrific takes. That's just one of them that comes to mind. But yeah, Teague is just like you mentioned, down earth. Like in a lot of the stories that he's saying, he's like, I'm getting cooked by so and so. Like this guy's, hitting me for 20, 30 points, whatever. And it's like, it's cool to hear that honesty instead of everybody just being their number one fan, talking about how good they were. I feel like that's kind of what makes him, a little bit different. But yeah, that definitely had me looking up Jeff Teague games as a Pacer, going into it. And I was like, you know what? They made the right move, not signing him, but it was definitely fun while it lasted.
It definitely was, Facci. So we're going to close things out with our last segment of the show today. And we're going to be doing this moving forward. Me and Facci just felt like it's a really good way to keep everybody kind of up to date on what's going on because there's so much happening across the league right now, and it's hard to keep up with everything that's going on. So we are going to be doing an NBA news dump every week. Not sure if it's going to be Mondays or not, but we're definitely going to have it once a week, and we're going to recap what happened that last week of the NBA world. So lots of bad stuff happened, lots of good stuff happened, but we're going to talk first things first, going back to July 15th. Team USA beats Australia 98-92. Anthony Davis had 17 points and 14 rebounds, while Tyrese Haliburton iced the game with back-to-back three-pointers in the corner. I know you guys saw the clips the Pacers put out on social media of those back-to-back three-pointers where Haliburton iced the game, but they got big. They got up big on Australia. Australia came back, made it a close game. Patty Mills, they've got a good team, Josh Giddey, but Team USA able to hold them off. Anthony Davis has been just the best big, I would say, for Team USA so far, and Haliburton was getting playing time and crunch time there and hit 2 big threes. So good news for him. But Facci, what else happened on July 15th?
So on July 15th, my guy, I know you like him too, but Deron Holmes from the Nuggets, he had surgery on his torn Achilles. He's going to miss all of his rookie season. That was someone that the Nuggets were really high on, trading up to pick 22 to get him. Absolute shame. And one of the guys that really benefited from going back to college to get into the first round. So just brutal stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was a big bummer for him, and no timetable for his return, but he is going to miss the rest of the regular season. Now, on July 16th, the Milwaukee Bucks, which Facci mentioned earlier, signed Gary Trent Jr. to a 1-year deal, and it was a minimum contract, which is just crazy that they were able to get Gary Trent Jr. on a minimum deal, Facci. So big pickup for them. I think he is an upgrade over Malik Beasley and will help that team. We talked about that a little bit, I think, last week, but the fact that it is official is interesting.
I have liked Gary Trent Jr. for a while. Like, just kind of seeing him develop in the league has been awesome. But here's where I feel like being represented by Clutch did not do him any favors.
Mm-hmm.
Look how much they went to bat for Bronny to get him not just drafted, but get him a guaranteed contract. All right, that they put a lot of work into that. Other clients that they have. You're talking about Gary Trent Jr., a guy who's actually produced in this league, a really good three-point shooter, a guy who's averaged about 14 points per game or more for the last, 4 or so years. There was like some group that was like the only players to average this, and that, shoot, about like 40% from three, whatever. It was like Steph Curry, Gary Trent Jr., and someone else that was really good. The difference was only one of those guys got a minimum contract.
Mm-hmm.
For Gary Trent Jr. to get a minimum is mind-blowing, and you're surprised that there isn't more teams that lined up to give him that minimum contract or more. It's just kind of a head-scratcher.
Well, according to Blake Murphy, who covers the Toronto Raptors, and that's where Gary Trent Jr. spent a lot of his time, he said that Gary Trent Jr. reportedly turned down multiple offers from other teams which were willing to offer him multi-year mid-level contracts and decided to sign with Milwaukee for the minimum to reunite with Damian Lillard. In the end, he opted to reunite with Lillard and contended for a championship on a 1-year minimum rather than taking multi-year offers at the smaller mid-level that were on the table, according to league sources. So that does kind of explain why he did it. We'll see if it pays off for him, but
hope so. But at the same point,
I mean, do we hope so?
I don't know. I really don't. I really don't hope so. I just want to say something nice because I like the guy, but you start to wonder, like, was it the difference between maybe like the Pistons who had some money, available, trying to offer it, where you're like, okay, I'm really not going to be like competing to win, going to win. I respect winning, but like, I also just kind of feel like the Bucks aren't really in like that championship, contention. You could make an argument that they are or aren't, but I just feel for Gary Trent Jr. I don't know when he's going to cash in. Maybe it happens next year. He's still only 25 years old, so anything's possible, but definitely a really good pickup for the Bucks.
All right, Facci, tell me a little bit more about the Dallas Mavericks and their star point guard.
All right, so just last week or earlier this week, depending on when you're listening to this, Kyrie Irving underwent hand surgery. Team says updates will be provided as necessary. Training camp starts in about 2.5 months. My guess, he'll be more than fine. I think it's good to be able to, get this out of the way early. You kind of wonder, NBA Finals ended a little over a month ago. What have you been doing? Maybe you should have got a little bit earlier, but at the same point, I don't think Kyrie's going to miss any time.
Yeah, just knowing that Kyrie Irving had hand surgery does kind of like, okay, good information to know, but it's not going to change too much of what I think happens for Dallas. So I believe there is a lot of people that has expected he'll be ready to go by training camp, but of course, a lot of teams do not give out information on stuff like that. Like, we have not heard an injury update from Benedict Mathurin. I don't know how long.
No,
so
that's true.
Who knows where he's at. But let's keep it moving here. July 16th was a very busy day in terms of news, but the NBA Board of Governors makes an in-game flopping penalty permanent. Facci. The NBA Board of Governors today voted to permanently implement the in-game flopping penalty as part of the playing rules. The in-game flopping penalty have been adopted on a 1-year trial basis for the 2023-2024 NBA season. Under the rule, when a game official calls a flop, the offending player is charged with a non-unsportsmanlike technical foul, and the opposing team is awarded 1 free throw attempt, which can be attempted by any player who is in the game when the technical foul is assessed. A player cannot be ejected from a game based on flopping violations. Under NBA rules, a player is automatically ejected after being called for 2 unsportsmanlike technical fouls, but no such rule applies to non-unsportsmanlike technical fouls, which is the designation for a flopping violation. So thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it is. And look, you got to take flopping out of the game. I mean, it's part of the reason why a lot of people didn't like LeBron for a while. It's like, as big as he is, we've seen him flop quite a few times. And
I think people still don't like LeBron.
It's true. Look, I know they don't, and maybe sometimes when you get to the end of your career, more people like you. But I always remember that being like, this guy's 6'8". He can't be flopping like this when you could see on a replay he didn't even get touched. And I just think there's no room for that in the game. So yeah, there should be a penalty. So I like it.
All right, we're gonna move on, Facci. Another update from the NBA Board of Governors. The Emeritus Cup, aka the in-season tournament NBA Cup, has new scoring rules. Will you tell us about that?
So the NBA Board of Governors voted to remove overtime scoring from the point differential and total point tiebreakers in the Emirates NBA Cup. The rule change, designed to promote competitive fairness, takes effect for the Emirates NBA Cup 2024, which will tip off on Tuesday, November 12th, and culminate with the championship on Tuesday, December 17th. Point differential and total points scored are the second and third tiebreakers after head-to-head record in the group play games. This is going to be used to determine which teams advance from group play into the knockout rounds of the Emirates NBA Cup. A team's point differential will now be 0 in group play games that go to overtime, and a team's total points scored will exclude points scored in overtime.
I think that's interesting. I don't remember last year if this was an issue. I'm assuming it was, since this is a new scoring rule that they're adding. So if a game goes into overtime, those points don't count. It's the 48-minute part of the game, because you know how these round robin scorings, work. If you have the same records, you go against group play, and if you have the same record in your group play, then it goes to, point differential, and that could be where it gets a little lopsided if you're including overtime scoring. So I think that is what this rule is trying to say, under my understanding of what it means. But do you read it the same way that I'm reading it?
Yeah, I think that must have been a situation. I guess I just don't remember the Pacers playing overtime games. So to me, it didn't have any effect. But hey, just something to clarify for this year.
All right, July 17th. Now moving on. 2 legends passed away in the NBA. Facci, tell me about the first one.
So Magic co-founder Pat Williams passed away at the age of 84 years old. Our condolences to the Williams family. And Joe Jellybean Bryant, a.k.a. Kobe's dad, passed away at the age of 69. Very unfortunate. 69, still way too young, but also just, hey, I think a lot of us are still very, very connected to Kobe, just tragic loss. So, we feel for the Bryant family.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a devastating news for both, but both live good lives, and all you can do is pray for their families and give them good thoughts during this time of mourning. And I know that Vanessa Bryant did put out a post on her social media account talking about Joe Jellybean Bryant as well. So if you guys want to check that out, you can find that on her Instagram account as well. But let's keep it going. July 17th, a little bit more happier news. Team USA cruised past Serbia 105-79 behind Steph Curry's 24 points. Bam Adebayo contributed 17 points off the bench. This was not much of a game really to talk about because it was such a blowout from start to finish. It was hard to watch. So Team USA gets the big dub in exhibition play. So good for them to continue to grow that chemistry as they get ready for the Olympics.
I think that was Team USA's only easy game so far. So the other ones have been far more challenging, but I'm sure we'll get to that shortly. July 18th, Los Angeles Clippers guard Russell Westbrook was traded to the Utah Jazz in a sign-and-trade deal for Chris Dunn. Utah Jazz released Russell Westbrook, and expectations are that he'll sign with the Denver Nuggets shortly. The Jazz also receive a 2030 second-round pick and the draft rights to Balsa Corp. Oh man, what is this? Koprivica and Cash. Yeah. I mean, that was just slipped in there. I don't know if that guy's ever going to come to the NBA, probably but I landed on trying to pronounce his name today. So the second time Russell Westbrook has been traded and released by the Utah Jazz. Just a crazy scenario. I'm sure they probably said, hey, Russ, look, you know the drill. It ain't going to happen here, but we're going to grant you your release. And for Westbrook to go to the Nuggets, I think that's cool. I think they very much needed a boost. And it's just kind of a little bit sad at this point for Russell Westbrook, who went from being Mr. Thunder to now. I mean, I'd probably leave a team out, but I mean, you're talking about, the Rockets, the Wizards, the Lakers, the Clippers, the Nuggets. We're not even going to count the teams that he's been traded and waived from, like Utah twice, but it's a lot of teams.
Danny Ainge loves doing Russell Westbrook favors, right? Trading for him and cutting him. Hey, that's one way to rebuild. So, all right. I don't want to make you have to read the other long one here, Facci, so I'll go ahead and read it. But go ahead and tell us a little bit about Kevin Durant because we talked about him not playing so far.
July 19th, Kevin Durant returns to practice for Team USA. It's crazy. I think he had been out for, I don't know if it was a month or so, but it had been quite some time. Look, Team USA, I don't want to say they haven't skipped a beat because they're, narrowly escaping, defeat in some of these games, but it's going to be great to add a guy like Kevin Durant who has just about more Olympic experience than anybody. I want to say that this Olympics breaks his tiebreaker with Carmelo Anthony for, most appearances that he had. So if Durant could get gold, I believe that will be a record.
That's good off the top of the knowledge head, or off the top of the head there, knowledge, Facci. That's pretty good stuff right there. So kudos to you. Did not have that in the notes, but bigger note here, July 19th. I think this is a little bit of an under-the-radar trade that's very interesting. The Memphis Grizzlies traded Zaire Williams, the 10th overall pick in the 2021 NBA draft, and a 2030 second-round pick to Brooklyn for Mamada Diakite. The Nets will also send the Grizzlies the draft rights to Nemanja Dangubic, the 54th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. The deal moves out the $6.1 million guaranteed on Williams' contract for 2024-2025 and creates some more salary cap flexibilities as the Grizzlies work toward re-signing guard Luke Kennard. Zaire Williams was one of the more interesting, intriguing prospects in that 2021 NBA draft as the 10th overall pick. So I think going to Brooklyn, it's a little bit of an interesting opportunity for him because they're going to be a bad team, so he might get more opportunities with the ball in his hand. But, the Grizzlies giving away one of their lottery picks so they have money to work under the cap to get Luke Kennard on an extension or re-sign him. I sometimes wonder if this new CBA is really doing teams a favor with what they're trying to do.
I don't know. You're starting to see a lot of teams that are having to make these decisions of giving up on young talent just to try and make some stuff happen. And for Zaire Williams, it's just I remember even in the draft being like, is this guy ready? And then it was like it was nuts to see that they traded up to get him. I remember they were at 17, and there was a couple other players involved in that deal. Like Jonas Valanciunas was involved in that deal, and Steven Adams and Eric Bledsoe. There was quite a few names that were involved in that deal, and I feel like he just never really got his footing underneath him in Memphis. I think going to Brooklyn is a really good spot for him. I think the Nets they should be rolling the dice on as much young talent as they can right now. And for Luke Kennard, hey, good for him, for someone who got waived that has been kind of hanging out there in free agency to be brought back. I think it's a good move by Memphis. But yeah, just interesting stuff where you could see teams they're really cap restricted right now, having to make tough calls, giving up on young players.
Yeah, and I think there were some traded player exceptions that these players were absorbed into, so it created a player exception for Memphis. And then I believe that the Nets were able to acquire Williams by using one of their traded player exceptions as well. So very interesting maneuvers there and very nerdy cap stuff that can be broken down even more in detail by the great Bobby Marks and guys like that. So, Bacha, we got 3 things left of news to talk about here. So let's keep it moving. Go to the next one, please.
All right. July 20th, Team USA survives an epic loss. It could have been real bad to South Sudan. LeBron James made the go-ahead basket with just seconds left to lift Team USA to a 101-100 win. LeBron led the team in scoring with 25 points, but it was the strength of the bench's defense that helped with Team USA to get that victory, willed by backup big man Anthony Davis.
Yeah, that was a crazy game, and I loved hearing the players from South Sudan talk about how they don't have indoor basketball courts to practice on.
Yeah.
They play outdoors, and this is a big moment for them. So this win, it wouldn't have counted against Team USA's Olympic pool play, anything like that. It's just exhibition stuff. It would have been a big, big moment for South Sudan.
The biggest.
And it would have been lost in the shuffle a lot, especially here in America, with Team USA loses to South Sudan instead of South Sudan beating Team USA. But just really cool to see like the likes of like a Winyan Gabriel on that team, NBA player, play with the Lakers for a little bit, have that opportunity to go out there and make a name for themselves against one of the, if not the best team in the Olympics. So a little bit of a bummer for South Sudan not to get this one since the game really didn't matter, but loved the effort from them. And it felt like Team USA was going to win it at one point, but then at one point I was like, man, are they going to be able to pull this one out? So kudos to them, Facci, for making this such a competitive game. And that's what I'll tell you about the Olympics. You can't overlook and overestimate your opponent, even if you're Team USA, because I know Tim Bontemps might think this is the greatest team ever assembled, but this is not the dream team. This is not the redeemed team. This is a good team, not a great team, in my opinion. There's a lot of other great Olympic teams that have had more talent than this team, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful by saying it. Like, this team's got a crap load of talent, but at the same time, there's been a lot of other Team USA teams that have had a lot of talent.
Oh, big time. Look, I think for South Sudan, I mean, look, incredible effort by them. I think that you could just see it. I know it sounds crazy because we got listeners all over the world. It feels like Team USA versus the world because that's the bullseye on our back. Everybody, you play Team USA, you
on
get
our back, Facci. What a patriot.
Yeah, you get up for that game and you want to beat America. I get it. And I think that Team USA probably overlooked South Sudan, saying, okay, hey, come on, we just beat, Serbia, who's got Jokic and Canada, who's got all these other good players. Like, we'll be fine. And they nearly blew it. And I think that at this point, the last few years, I feel like Team USA has dropped one of those exhibition games that's then had everybody being like, oh, no, not again. And I think that was probably the wake-up call that Team USA needed.
All right, let's keep it moving. 2 more noteworthy news notes here. Cleveland Cavaliers forward center Evan Mobley agreed on a 5-year, $224 million maximum rookie contract extension that could become worth as much as $269 million. They recently extended Donovan Mitchell, so now they have Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley locked up for the long term as this team tries to get their footing under new head coach Kenny Atkinson and change things up a little bit, hoping that they can put a little bit more of a dent in the playoffs next year with this group. So Evan Mobley, I like him a lot. I think he's better as a center than a power forward next to Jared Allen. So we'll see what plays out there. But I think Evan Mobley with Kenny Atkinson will probably have a better opportunity to kind of grow and branch out as a player than what he was doing with JB Bickerstaff. No offense to JB Bickerstaff. I just think Atkins is probably a better coach.
Yeah, so do I. I like Kenny Atkinson. I think that Evan Mobley is a really talented player. I think he's one of the future big men in this league. So they had to get this deal done. It was just anyone could look at the dollar amount and be like, "Oh, it's a lot of money." That's what the going rate is for a max player, and I feel that Evan Mobley is definitely someone that is probably going to end up being their franchise guy for a long time. Donovan Mitchell might have re-signed. But if I'm a betting man saying who's going to be there longer term, I definitely think it's Evan Mobley. I feel like he's their cornerstone player. He's the guy they took number 2 overall in the draft. And I think that he's got an incredible future ahead of him. At some point, I think he's going to make an all-star game. Defensively, he's already there. I think offensively, he's still, has some ways to go in his game, but I think that you could already see some of the improvements that he's taken. Limited sample size, shot 37% from 3 last year. I think that was awesome to add to his game. Already a really good shot blocker, rebounder. Future is blinding for Evan Mobley.
Well, speaking of blinding, the bank account for the Boston Celtics continues
never ending
to just blow up. And who cares? Because this is a team on a mission to repeat their championship. And Facci, today they agreed to a 4-year, $45 million contract extension with who?
Sam Hauser. Sam Hauser. I couldn't believe it. I thought when I saw the notification, I just assumed it was that he was getting traded because it was, okay, well, Boston had to make some tough decisions, right? I'm like, when does the tough decision come? They're just paying everybody right now. And for Sam Hauser to get 4 years, $45 million, I mean, you're talking about that's more than $11 million average. That feels like a lot to me. He's a good 3-point shooter. He is good player, but at this point, it's like everybody on the Boston Celtics has gotten like a substantial raise, and I don't know when that first domino is going to fall, but at some point they're going to have to make that tough decision, and I think that they're probably saying we're all in to run it back and win another championship while we can this next season.
Yeah, make the decision later. Al Horford probably retires after next year, would be my guess. We'll see what happens. I mean, they got to keep as many players as they possibly can because they can't go out and get anybody. So they got to keep their own. That's kind of where they're at right now. They can make trades with these players that they do sign, but at the same point, I don't know if I'm trading a lot of stuff for Sam Hauser at that kind of money, but he's a good player for what the Celtics do. I actually like his fit with that team quite a bit. So, good for them. The rich get richer, but like you said, how much longer will this go on? So that wraps up our first ever NBA news dump. Let us know in the comment section on YouTube or on social media if you like us going through some of the stuff maybe you missed in the league. It does kind of help us as well, kind of keep track of what's taking place. So I enjoyed the NBA news dump myself. I think it was good to kind of see everything that we may have missed. And Facci, this has been a fun episode, a little bit of a lengthy one. Did not expect us to go an hour on all this stuff, but hey, when you think of everything we talked about, there was a lot of news. So a lot of good things to talk about. But once again, if you go back to the beginning, Team USA, do not bench Tyrese Haliburton. That's all I got to say, Fudge.
It would be a mistake. So give Haliburton a shine, give him some minutes, let him prove what he could do. Because I think you're not going to be disappointed. And hey, hopefully when you're listening to this, Andrew Nembhard has put pen to paper and signed his contract extension. We obviously don't know that now because he's not eligible yet. But hey, in 24 hours from now, that could be a totally different case. So I guess let's cross our fingers if that's what we all want. I know that's what we want.
A lot to be excited about, Facci, and I know the Pacers are excited that Summer League play is over. Not the greatest showing from them. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that in depth with Chris Zaneri here in a couple of days. He'll be joining the podcast for our Wednesday episode. And it is Kenny Atkinson. I got tongue-tied there a little bit. I said Atkins. Overthought myself when I said Atkinson, and I was like, oh, no, it's Atkinson. I'm like, what am I doing? So it is Atkinson. Thank you, Facci, for correcting me on that when you talked about him after I was speaking. So anyway, that's my blunder. I probably had a few more throughout the episode, but hey, talking for an hour after the day I've had feels pretty crazy. So it's been a busy Sunday from our end of things, but we love you, Pacer Nation. We hope you all are doing great. Hope you guys have a great start to your week on this Monday. Make sure you follow, subscribe wherever you can. But Facci, if you're hoping the Pacers get this contract extension signed with Andrew Nembhard, then hit me with those 3 words.
Let's go, Pacers.
Let's go, Pacers.